Do you notice that you're more snappy and irritable? What are your signs that you're stressed out?
Okay, you know what the stressor is, you know how it shows up, you know what needs to be done. Now you have to put it into action.
Stress Awareness Month, not that this is only happening this month, but if you watch the news at all lately, it can be extremely stressful. Welcome back to Wellness Wednesday. My name is Beth Gustin, a licensed professional counselor here in Colorado, and I'm with my co-host, Robin Ennis, a licensed clinical social worker, also in Colorado. And we thought, given that April happens to be, among other things, National Stress Awareness Month, that we would talk about the impact of stress and some ways we can work to reduce stress.
I feel like this is a good one because stress is very universal. At some point in our lives, we all get stressed. And so it's important to recognize how stress shows up in us, what causes our stress, and what to do about it. Have you ever been in a room where you could just tell somebody was really stressed out just by their mannerisms? And then think about how you reacted to that level of stress. Did it make you uncomfortable, overwhelmed? Because in addition to you feeling stressed, it can also spread to people in your environment. And so that's another thing too, is to be mindful of taking care of yourself, but then also to be mindful of how your actions impact others.
Absolutely. And being aware of what your signals of stress are is also really helpful. So for example, how do you know you're stressed out? Do you start to kind of breathe faster? Your breathing is more shallow and rapid. Do you clench your fists? Do you notice that your hair is kind of getting more brittle and falling out? Do you notice that you're more snappy and irritable? What are your signs that you're stressed out? And just to throw some fun curveballs in here, even positive events like a wedding, the birth of a child, a marriage, those things can also cause stress. So it's really important to pay attention to your body's stress signals.
Yes, exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes, positive events like weddings and babies can be stress because you're entering into the unknown, right? And anytime somebody's entering into something that's familiar, whether it's pleasant or not, it can be hard to deal with. And I want to add to that too about how stress shows up in you. Some people will have a lack of sleep. That's a key indicator, or just constant worrying or intrusive thoughts, just being stuck in your head. And so if you start to notice those, really check in with yourself and again say, okay, so I'm feeling stressed. But why am I feeling stressed? Because the why is the big indicator on how to try and eliminate or decrease what you're feeling. So like an example is on my caseload, speaking of weddings, one of my individuals on my caseload has a family member getting married and they're trying to prepare on what that'll look like. And, people in their family, a younger individual who's involved in the wedding has autism. So that's the unknown. How will he react to the crowds? What will that look like? So although it is a happy event, it's trying to plan everything and make sure everything runs smoothly.
Absolutely. Again, and I think it's also important to kind of, if you can plan ahead, we can't predict every stressful situation, but there's a lot of things you can do to plan ahead to try to mitigate or reduce the level of stress that you might experience. So thinking about something like starting a new job, what can you do to kind of help yourself be as prepared as possible for that new experience? And do you locate the building so you know where you're going the first day of the job? Do you do some research so you kind of know what you're walking into to the best of your ability the morning of that new job? Make sure you eat well, sleep well, exercise well. All the basic self-care things that we talk about all the time on this podcast are going to help you keep your stress levels down.
Yes, I agree. Preparation can definitely help, again, so that you can have a little bit of indignation on what you're walking into. Okay, you know what the stressor is, you know how it shows up, you know what needs to be done. Now you have to put it into action. Some situations may feel like they're uncontrollable. The one thing that you have to remind yourself is that you have control over your own actions. And so trying to think of how you can best help yourself in a stressful situation.
So what do we do with all this stress? Like, how do we cope with it? What are some things that help you de-stress? And this can be a wide variety of options. So I'm thinking about working out can be a good way to reduce stress. But if it's more like in the moment, Are there fidgets you can carry with you and kind of have in your pocket that kind of ground you and something you can fidget with? Or aromatherapy is really good for this. So can you wear a diffuser necklace or bracelet with an essential oil that's calming to you? Or can you practice deep breathing? Because if we slow our brain and body down, our stress level goes down, the cortisol in our body goes down, which is our stress hormone.
Right. Listening to music, listening to a favorite song before you go to work, kind of like an anthem, right? Your get pumped anthem. Another one that I like, speaking of grounding techniques, is a 5-4-3-2-1 that can help you be more in touch with your environment. So there are a plethora of things that you can do. And, even going back to what I said, so let's say that it's a person or, in your environment who is constantly stressed and it's starting to rub on you. So one action that you can do is, okay, so maybe just try to distance yourself from that person whenever you feel like your stress level is starting to match theirs. Because speaking of the cortisol, stress hormone, is that there have been studies that show when you're around somebody who's stressed, it rubs off on you and unintentionally you start to feel what they're feeling. So just try and be mindful of that too.
And conversely, if you are able to help them reduce their stress level, you can rub off on them. And the reverse is also true if you can stay calm and grounded within yourself. And I like the 5-4-3-2-1. I use that a lot too with my clients and with myself. If 5-4-3-2-1 doesn't work, you can modify it and do anything like count the number of different bird songs that you hear, or count the number of blue cars that you see going by, or name everything in the room that's red. There's lots of different ways you can do this, but the whole goal is to get your brain distracted so you're not thinking about the stressful stuff that's happening. And you can take a step back, mentally speaking, and get some clarity and help kind of keep your body calm and keep your brain quieter.
Exactly. So we were talking about this earlier, and I feel like this topic really comes into play, especially the day after tax day, right? So now you can take a deep breath if you filed your taxes already. And if you haven't, still continue to take those deep breaths, right? And realizing, taking it one moment at a time and realizing, that you'll get it done. But this definitely is a stressful time for people. So I think it's very fitting that it's Stress Awareness Month.
I agree. And I also think it's very fitting that it's Stress Awareness Month. Not that this is only happening this month, but if you watch the news at all lately, it can be extremely stressful. And I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about the conflict in different countries going on. I'm talking about maybe some local news story about something disturbing that happened in your neighborhood. Like there's a lot of stressful events happening locally and worldwide. And that also can increase our stress level.
I agree, Beth. I had a client who worked in a cable industry, and so he was constantly around the news broadcasts of news events, and it was wearing on him. It was stressing him out. And then also, too, myself, is that I had to step away from watching everything that's going on because I felt very helpless. Like I wanted to do something, but what can you really do? And so I had to try and monitor how much news intake that I was bringing in because I started to realize that I was feeling stressed through, my rapid thoughts of worry in regards to the varying news reports. I feel like, I think we've talked about this before on our podcast, but vicarious trauma. I feel like as people in society, by watching the different adversity that can happen through news, that we can ourselves have that level of vicarious trauma. And so it's important to take care of ourselves, limiting, if you need to, how much you pay attention to the news.
Absolutely. And I think, it is perfectly okay to watch less news. It's good to be informed, yes. And it's also good to monitor how much you're taking in. And is there something else you can do instead with that time that might provide a little more lightheartedness or just a break from the constant cognitive overload that we experience because there's so much coming at us with news and social media. Or maybe you seek out good news, positive news, read that instead.
Yeah, there is so much coming at us, and then it's hard to figure out what to do with all of that information. So yeah, Beth, like you said, read some positive news or something to try and offset to create that balance.
So as we wind down this episode, take a minute and think about, where is the stress in your life? And what can you do differently to reduce that amount of stress? We can't avoid it. And some amount of stress is healthy because it just kind of helps us be aware of our surroundings and helps us take action if needed. But too much stress definitely is really harmful to our body and our mental well-being. So as we're winding down, like I said, what is kind of one thing you can do to help reduce your stress over the next, hour or day? And do it.
Yeah, and we definitely want to hear from you. So if you feel comfortable in writing in, let us know what your stress techniques are. And then we can also too share them with our listeners. Because as we've said in the past, we want to hear from you, and we like the insightful comments that we're getting.
Yes. So as always, take care and stay grounded.
Yes. Until next time, take care.
Oh yeah, Wellness Wednesday with Beth and Robin. Gonna settle it down. Oh yeah, get your feet planted on the ground.
For more podcasts with the blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to leave us some feedback, give us a call at 612-367-6093. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.
Wellness and taking care of ourselves. It's all about you and taking care of yourself. Oh yeah.
When we share
what we see through
each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap
between the limited expectations and the reality
of blind abilities.
and the realities of blind abilities.